something extraordinary about this week's portion. When you follow the Torah's flow from beginning to end, we get to this place where we've almost achieved the promise. You're almost there. We've been traveling for 40 years through the desert. We are actually about to make it. Moses is giving us the deepest Torah, this Torah of Moses' own life. And then we pause because the holidays come. And then we have this interruption, this incredibly complicated interruption of the weekly Torah portion, and we start bouncing around the different parts of Torah. But what I want to share is that in this week's Parashat Ki Tavo, we have the part of the Torah that you might find very familiar if you've ever been to a Seder on Pesach, because this portion says, when you get to the promised land, bring your first fruits to the priest and recite this formula. And the formula is actually quite beautiful and perhaps even familiar to you. It starts with the words, Arami Oved Avi, Vayered Mitzrayma. My father, my ancestor, was a wandering Aramean who went down to Egypt. And it's been translated lots of different ways. Either my ancestor was a wandering Aramean, which means Abraham, Avram at the time, or it might mean Arami Oved Avi, through the Midrash, through some imaginative reading, it can say, and sought to destroy my ancestor. That would be Lavan the Aramean sought to destroy Jacob, my ancestor. And both stories have their place in our narrative, but if you take them begadol, if you take them as a meta lesson for you, for me, for our descendants, maybe even for our ancestors, the question is, do you say, before God called my ancestor, he was a wanderer, we didn't really have a purpose? Or, once upon a time, my ancestor was assaulted by another Aramean, which means as we tell our stories, you have choices to make. When you tell your own deepest stories, do you start from a place of pain and you say, this is my trauma that defines my personal notion of self? Or do you say, before I achieved this promise, this sense of purpose, this gift from God of a story of liberation and freedom, this was my life? And in fact, as you read the portion, if you read this paragraph, my ancestor was a wandering Aramean, went down to Egypt with very few people, stayed there for a while, became a great and very populous nation. The Egyptians were harsh with us, oppressed us, imposed heavy labor upon us. You might know this from the language of the Seder. If you do the kind of Seder I did as a child, you read the paragraphs one at a time, and then certain voices become familiar, and I expect to hear my grandfather reciting this. We cried to God, the God of our ancestors, and God heard our pleas, saw our plight, our misery, and our oppression. God freed us from Egypt with a mighty hand, an outstretched arm, and awesome power, and signs and wonders. God brought us to this place, gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and I now bring these first fruits of the soil with which you, God, have given me. The language here is gorgeous. It's amazing. It's not, if you bring the first fruits, then God will bless you. In fact, there's no language of command here. I stand before God in the promised land, and all I offer is my gratitude. It's hard to imagine going through the desert for 40 years, knowing only this story, the hardship parts of any story, and then finally arriving at the place you've been waiting to get, and the first thing you do is you give away the thing that you grew. You give away. You give a gift. One famous Beatle once said, the measure of the love you get to the love you give. Well, that sounds a whole lot like I think we could ache to be, which is, you want to be in a relationship of love, give it away. I stand before you, God, with gratitude in this moment. Do you know anyone who's ever opened up a pizza shop or a restaurant and who takes the first dollar that they ever earned and they tape it to the wall? It's beautiful, right? You look at it many years later, but can you imagine in that moment where you know you're not going to break even with your investment for years probably, but you take that first mark of your arrival and you tape it to the wall. It's like we put a mezuzah right behind us, reminding us that this actually isn't about money. It's about the blessing. It's about expressing gratitude. It's about being present in this moment of life and saying thank you. You know what's absent in that paragraph that we recite before the high priest, then annually, every time we have first fruits? What's amazing is it tells the story of Sinai. It tells a story of the journey from Egypt, but it leaves out Sinai. Isn't it incredible to tell your whole story and to leave out a significant moment, culminating moment like meeting God at Sinai? It might be because the language of command actually isn't the only way. The language of authority and accountability, of failure and success, that isn't actually the only way to talk about a relationship of gratitude. In fact, that's the right way. You stand in a moment of arrival and you say, thank God. Here's some love. This is how I acknowledge myself. We're about to enter into the high holidays, and you can have any number of experiences when you go to a place where there are services happening. One of those can be the language of the Machzor, the Siddur, the prayer book that we use on the high holidays, where it's much more about the God of judgment than the God of compassion, the God of love. It's in there, but it's a little bit more hidden. This language in this week's Parsha is about standing before God and being intentional about the language that I use to express my relationship with the universe, to tell my story. Part of that is making sure that gratitude is so big in my own heart as I choose my words. The other one is to recognize something that is absent also in the paragraph. No one's name comes up. Not which ancestor it was, not even me. I don't say my own name. It's all about the we. It is all about a story that is greater than myself. I stand before God and I say, all of these people, all of my history, all of this story that predates me, it has helped shape me into the person that I am, and I stand before you, God, and I can only say one thing. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And then you take a basket of your fruits and you say, here, God, here's a basket of fruit. I grew this. I'm giving you from my own heart, my deepest gift, something I worked very hard to achieve. You a long time ago, and I'm doing my best to give my best. So God, all I have to say is, thank you. We made it. Took a long time. We're here.